Hello, everyone, and welcome to Egyptian Tarot, where during this class we focus on the Thoth Tarot deck and Aleister Crowley and his interpretation of Egyptian astrology and Egyptian numerology and Egyptian mysticism. We also deconstruct and discuss Aleister Crowley as a whole and whether or not this deck and this form of tarot reading should even be called Egyptian tarot in the first place, seeing as how it was created by somebody who is not Egyptian. It is an interpretation of somebody who visited Egypt twice. And the reason that he thinks that he understands Egyptian numerology, astrology, mysticism, and mythology is due to the robbery of an ancient pyramid. And whether or not that gives him the right to say that he is the creator of Egyptian tarot and that the Thoth deck is even Egyptian at all. Last class, we discussed Aleister Crowley as a person. We went over a very brief introduction to who Aleister Crowley is, what his branch of mysticism and occultism was, what Thelema is, which is the religion slash spirituality slash cult that Aleister Crowley created, as well as his wife, and what kind of the issues with Aleister Crowley are, the criticisms of Aleister Crowley, the good things about Aleister Crowley, at least in my opinion. Obviously, remember that these classes, when we discuss and talk about things like Aleister Crowley or about people in general, these are just my opinions. If you are somebody who absolutely loves Aleister Crowley and you think that I'm a total asshole for even insinuating that he might have culturally appropriated many things, that's fine. Please argue with me. That's what these classes are for. I love to debate things, and it's never rude to say, hey, Alex, I think you're wrong, and let's talk about why. I love that. Please do that. So last class, yeah, we discussed Aleister Crowley, we discussed Thelema, we discussed Aleister Crowley's trip to Egypt, how he came up with the Thoth Tarot deck, and we briefly went over Wicca, who Gerard, not Gerard, no, Gerald Gardner, who Gerald Gardner is, and what Alexandrian Wicca is, what fairy Wicca is, and what Gardnerian Wicca is, and how those relate to the Thoth deck, how they relate to Aleister Crowley. We discussed the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. We discussed Hermeticism, and we kind of just jumped into talking about all of the mythology and then how all of that relates to the Thoth deck and quote unquote Egyptian tarot. So we're going to explore that a little bit more today. And we are going to dive deeper into the Thoth deck, into Egyptian. Whenever I say Egyptian tarot, please remember that this class is specifically this class is specifically here for us to discuss and debunk the idea that this even is Egyptian tarot. Because like I said, it was created by somebody who's not Egyptian and who doesn't even really understand Egyptian mythology. So, yes, when I say Egyptian tarot, what I mean is the Thoth deck and Aleister Crowley. And we're going to dive more into the Thoth deck. We're going to dive more into the Iron Pentacle. We are going to dive more into Aleister Crowley's entire theology. We are going to go over the Hermetic laws and what those have to do with the Thoth deck. And then we're going to start reading the Thoth deck. And I'm going to explain to you guys how it differs from Middle Eastern tarot and how it kind of became one of the very first actually European tarot decks, because the astrology that it's based off of is a mixture of Middle Eastern numerology, and Egyptian numerology and European numerology, which is very unique for a tarot deck. It's one of the most unique tarot decks because it's not actually based off of anything indigenous. It's not based off of, is, for example, original tarot that you see that's not the Thoth deck. Most decks are based off of indigenous Syrian, Iranian, and Lebanese numerology. They are based off of indigenous astrology that is based on tropical astrology before it reached Europe. And these things have stayed the same throughout as it moved to Europe, as it moved to Italy from the Middle East. They kept the same indigenous numerology. They kept the numerology exactly the same. They did not change it to make it more Christianized. They didn't change it to make it more Europeanized and Eurocentric. They kept the numerology exactly the way it was thousands and thousands of years ago in Iran, Lebanon, Afghanistan, Syria, and in the indigenous tribes that created the mysticism, the people of Italy and the Strega witches and the people in France and Italy who really helped tarot to move across all of Europe did not change the numerology, whereas Aleister Crowley did. He changed the numerology and he changed the astrology so that it fit what he thought and what he decided was Egyptian tarot. So we're going to talk about so many things. So the first thing that I wanted to start with was a few of the books that I recommend for this class. And Paul has also shared what I think is, let me click the link before I tell you what he has shared. Yes, Paul has shared the amazing, incredible information that he has about the Iron Pentacle, which is amazing and awesome. And we are going to dive deep into the Iron Pentacle because it's very important, because the fairy tradition of witchcraft is largely, they use the Thoth tarot deck and Egyptian tarot. Fairy practitioners do. They use this deck and they use these ideologies as a huge part of their entire spirituality. So if you are Wiccan, and especially a fairy practitioner, then the Thoth deck and Aleister Crowley's view on what he calls Egyptian tarot are going to be a huge part of your spirituality and practice. And so that's why we are discussing the Iron Pentacle, is because fairy practitioners use this. It wasn't that Aleister Crowley really has a lot necessarily to do with the creation of fairy. He does and he doesn't. We're going to talk about that too. But it's that fairy witches love the Thoth deck and they love Egyptian tarot and this whole idea that Aleister Crowley created about Egyptian mysticism and stuff. It's very, the fairies love it. The fairy Wiccans. Anyway, so please click on Paul's link. I have been reading it and it's amazing. So the books that I recommend for this class are, the first one is Tarot of the Four Elements. And I'm going to put these books into the chat right now. These will also be listed in the bibliography section on the website as books that we use for class. Every single book that professors use for class will be listed in the bibliography section of the website, always. So if you're looking to see kind of what books the professors are using, that's a great place to start. So Tarot of the Four Elements, and it's by Isha Lerner. It's Lerner, yeah. And Amu, no, AMU, Amu Erickson, Ericksen. Okay, so that's the first book that we will be using for this class. I recommend, if you would like, getting it. All the books that I use, the books that I use specifically for class that I recommend to students, I try to make sure that they're pretty cheap and I'm not trying to get you to spend like $400 on one of the super intense ancient occult books that are extremely overpriced and most of the time not worth it. So if I do ever recommend one of those books to you, hopefully usually I try to like take pictures of the pages that you'll need instead and kind of post them for free. Anyway, the next one, so that book specifically is one that I recommend because it's really, really good. And it actually helps you to understand the elements within tarot. And it specifically discusses and talks about the elemental magic used within the Thoth tarot deck and Egyptian tarot. The next book that I'm going to talk about is a book that I think that you should have for reference of one that is not very good. One that is a great example of why maybe somebody who has been to Egypt twice might not actually understand the astrology and numerology of ancient Egypt. And it's called the Sacred Circle Tarot. And it's a Celtic tarot book. It's about Celtic tarot, but they reference Aleister Crowley and his influence on modern Celtic Wicca and modern neo-pagan Celtic traditions. And it's a very good insight for why Aleister Crowley is known for his cultural appropriation and his kind of way of deciding that he knows and understands everything about a culture just by talking to one person from that place and like taking a vacation there once. So it's called Sacred Circle Tarot and it's by Anna Franklin. So Sacred Circle Tarot by Anna Franklin. I suggest looking up the PDF for this book. Don't buy the book. It's not a good book, but look up the PDF so you can like laugh a little. And we're going to use it to talk about why sometimes not every book that you read about neo-paganism is a good reference. And then Planets for Pagans is one of my all-time favorite astrology books and like all-time favorite astrology books ever. And it talks a lot about Aleister Crowley's effect on astrology and how Aleister Crowley's opinions and his involvement in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn affected the evolution of tropical astrology. But there's also, that's only a couple chapters. The rest of the book is just, it's amazing. It's by Rena Shesso. And Rena Shesso is actually one of our professors. And she's taught a lot of our in-person classes. So I know that that's difficult, but she teaches a lot of our in-person classes. And she's taught 2 of them that are up on the YouTube channel right now. But Planets for Pagans is one of her books. She's an incredible author. I've been working with her as one of my mentors since I was 4 years old. She is incredible and amazing, and I love her so much. And if you'd like to look her up, she lives in Colorado. She's fantastic. She also teaches her own classes, has her own website and everything. If you'd ever like to learn personally from her, I think her classes are like $25 or something. So it's called Planets for Pagans by Rena Shesso. Rena. No. Rena Shesso. Okay. And then the last book we're going to use for this class, if you haven't read Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, go read Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. Just do it. It's not the best book. It's not going to teach you a lot of amazing, incredible things. But if you are going to be interested in modern occultism, if you are going to be interested in modern witchcraft and kind of the evolution of modern witchcraft through time, read Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. You can find it as a PDF free online. It's free everywhere. It is, if you're going to be interested in this stuff, just read it. Just read the book. If you're interested in Wicca, if you're interested in modern occult Wicca and like just modern occultism, Hermeticism, any of these things, read Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft by Raymond Buckland. Yes, the red book and the green book and the blue book. You should read all of them. The red book, the green book, and the blue book can all be found as PDFs online for free. Super easy. Also, I found mine at the library. Very, very simple. I actually found it at the library a long time ago and then accidentally ended up losing it and then paid the library for the book and then found it. So I don't recommend doing that. We shouldn't be taking books from libraries, but like it was an accident. But anyway.
The great thing about living in Michigan is we've got the MEL here, which allows us to borrow a book from any book in the state that's in a library.
Oh yeah, you said that, which is awesome. Oh yeah, and for anybody who doesn't live there, I forgot to mention this too. If you have a library card, you can go to, there's many different apps, but my favorite is called Libby. And just download Libby. It's a free app. You can use any library card from anywhere, any library in the United States. And you can just get you have access to all of the books in their library just on the app for free. You can get them as audiobooks. You can listen to them. They're all free right there for you. And you can just read all of them. You can check them out and just read all of them on your phone or on your tablet for free. It's awesome. So if you're going to get Buckland's book, I would recommend maybe getting it from the library or from the thrift store or something, because if you try to buy Buckland's book, I don't know. I think they charge you. I think it's like $25 or like $30 or something. I don't know. It's kind of overpriced for what it is, but I do recommend it if you're interested in this kind of stuff. It's kind of the beginner's guide. It's like Wicca for dummies, but better. So, yes, those are the books. And then, of course, the next book we'll be using for class is, of course, the one that's on the title of this class. It's just called, I think it's just called Thoth Tarot, but let me pull it up for you. I have the book, but I couldn't find it before class. It's like lost in my 700 million bookshelves. So I'll have it for next class, but let me show it to you real quick. Thoth, Thoth. Here we go. Okay, so it's called, oh my gosh. Here we go. The Book of Thoth. It is called The Book of Thoth by Aleister Crowley. Yep. And it's on Amazon for $23. God, that's kind of expensive for what it is. But let me show you the cover of the book real quick. I suggest getting this book for class if you would like to. But I think there's also a free PDF of it online too. Okay, hold on. Cool. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So that's the Book of Thoth, Egyptian Tarot, Aleister Crowley. Yes. So, okay, now that we have all of that covered, awesome. Okay, so for the full PDF, I would just Google oh, you can only find 79 pages. I'm not sure. I will search for it, and if I do find PDFs of these books, I'll post them to the main chat. You're already in the main chat, right, Salem? Like our big main chat, or have we not even put you in there yet? Let me know right now, because I'm adding you right now. Did you accept my friend request? I'm adding you now. Oh, yep. Yes, you did. Okay. Hold on. I'm adding you to our main chat right now. Okay. Salem. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to welcome you. Everyone. Yay. There we go. Okay. So I'll post it in this chat if I find the PDFs. And if Paul does, he can post them too. So let me pull my notes out really quick. Okay. So the first we're going to discuss and talk about the differences between the Thoth deck and original tarot. And the first difference that is very noticeable as soon as you open the deck of tarot cards is going to be
how it says Thoth on it.
Well, yeah, there's that.
Yes!
But a lot of decks, a lot of the decks are named like different things, and they have they've got a lot of different names. But the Thoth deck specifically has more cards than the rest of them. He also renamed several of the major arcana. He also rearranged the numerical, astrological, and the elemental correspondences. So okay. Where do I start here? So basically, if you open a regular deck of tarot cards, you are going to have
hell yeah. I've got a profile picture now.
Oh, nice.
Hi.
So the Book of Thoth, Crowley discusses and talks about how his major arcana arrangement forms a double loop in the zodiac number and letter number correspondences compared to the Golden Dawn deck, where there is no loop. So the Golden Dawn deck, does anybody know, by the way, whenever the Thoth book, the Book of Thoth, whenever it mentions the Hermetic, the Golden Dawn deck, what deck they're talking about? Okay, so a nickname for the Rider-Waite deck is the Golden Dawn deck. Does anybody know why? Well, I guess if you didn't know that, so you wouldn't know why. So the reason why it's nicknamed the Golden Dawn deck is because many members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn had influence over the creation of the Rider-Waite deck. But the Rider-Waite deck and the Golden Dawn's way of creating that, like I said, they kept the Middle Eastern, the Arabic meanings for the numerology. They kept the Arabic meanings for the elements, and then they kept the Italian meanings for the major arcana. And they also used original ancient tropical astrology, which originated in Mesopotamia, as the astrology for the Rider-Waite deck. So the Golden Dawn was sticking very traditional. They looked very similar to the Mamluk cards, and the Mamluk cards are some of the very first tarot cards ever discovered in ancient Arabia, as well as like Southeast Asia in general. And so the Golden Dawn had a lot of influence over the Rider-Waite deck, and the Rider-Waite deck was also then illustrated by this incredible woman who also studied Middle Eastern numerology and tropical astrology and worked with the Romani people and the Strega witches to understand ancient Arabic and Italian tropical astrology and numerology. And so the Rider-Waite deck has a lot of indigenous knowledge that went into creating it, even though the Golden Dawn is not known for their appreciation of indigenous tribes outside of Europe. But they did do a very good job with their influence over the European tarot decks that arose during the creation of the Rider-Waite. Does everybody know what the Rider-Waite deck is? No. That's okay if you don't. Totally fine. As soon as I show you, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Let me pull it up for you really quick. So the Rider-Waite deck that I'm talking about. Rider-Waite. Okay. And the woman's name, who the amazing, incredible illustrator of this deck, somebody that I very much so admire, was Pamela Coleman. And by the way, Pamela Coleman was number one, a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and never, ever, ever got recognition for being the one who illustrated the deck. She probably did more research than every single one of those fuckers combined. And she worked with the Romani people, she worked with Strega witches, she worked with indigenous tribes throughout Europe to help her understand the numerology and tropical astrology and elemental mysticism that went into ancient Mamluk cards, and created the most incredible symbology through her illustrations of the Rider-Waite deck. But of course, the deck went on to be called the Rider-Waite deck. The reason for that being Waite, Rider-Waite-Smith being the author of the book, and the he was basically the academic behind the deck, and then Pamela was the one who drew them. He was the one who created the book behind them. He was the one who advertised them. He was the one given credit. He basically, because he was a man. There really isn't a great explanation for why, Rider-Waite-Smith was given all the credit that he was, because he did not do much. Pamela did most of it, but of course she was a woman, and this was in 1909. So, So they were both members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, both Rider Waite and Pamela. And they created this deck. Let me show it to you. And you're gonna know exactly what it is the second I show it to you. If you've ever seen tarot cards before in your life, you are gonna know exactly what I'm talking about.
Never even heard of tarot cards. What are those?
Right? What are tarot cards? Okay, see, do you see, this is the Rider Waite deck. Everybody knows this deck. Right? It's okay if not. I'm sorry. Sometimes
I recognize it.
Okay, good. Okay, cool.
I recognize it too. I know exactly what.
Perfect. Good. Okay, good. Lovely. So yes, this is the Rider Waite deck. And then I have the wiki page pulled up just because that was easiest, but this is Pamela and Dude Man.
She looks like she created a tarot deck.
Right? So doesn't she? She looks like she hung out with the Romani people and the Strega witches.
She looks like the first person that the Salem witch trials would be like, excuse me.
Exactly. She totally does. And she was amazing. She was a real witch that was part of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. She did her research. She was an incredible practitioner. She had, her issues and problematic stuff too. This was 1909, obviously. To today's standards, she probably would not be a very ethical person. But still, she was an incredible witch and did amazing things for the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Not only did she illustrate the Rider Waite deck, she hand drew every single card over and over and over again, because back then, getting them actually printed was a whole process. And so a lot of times Pamela would just draw them over and over again. It was incredible. And she was a very talented witch, never got any of the credit she deserved until like hundreds of years later, or not hundreds because it's 1909, but until the very long time later, she did not get any of the credit, which is super sad. So yep, Rider Waite deck. It's one of the most popular decks in Europe, and it was created by Pamela and him, and they were members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And if you don't know what the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is, we will talk about it in this class more. We talked about it in the first class, but we're going to continue to discuss the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So don't worry if you don't know what that is. But also, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is pretty easy to look up, and the information about it is decent. It is a secret society, so you're not going to get everything by looking it up online. But it's pretty easy to do your research. It's pretty easy to find books. It's pretty easy to find references. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is pretty well known. So, okay. So we have stopped sharing. All right. So anyway, okay. So you have the Rider Waite deck. You have the Rider Waite deck created by members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Now you have Crowley, who was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, separating and creating his own deck after 2 vacations to Egypt. Okay. And after reading a couple books on Egyptian mysticism and learning from this one dude that he met in Egypt. Crowley, and I explained to you the double loop. So Crowley demonstrates that his major arcana arrangement forms a double loop in the zodiac number and letter to number correspondences, compared to the Golden Dawn deck where there is no loop. So he also changed the names of many of the major arcana. He also changed the astrological meaning and which zodiac sign represents each card. For example, Aquarius and Aries in the Thoth deck are interchanged, so are switched and swapped. he switched and swapped Aquarius and Aries. So, for example, his double, the Magician in the Rider-Waite deck, for all of you who have ever looked at tarot before, the major arcana card of the Magician. In the Thoth deck, it's called the Magus. In the Rider-Waite deck, you have number 2 represented by the High Priestess. In the Thoth deck, the number 2 is represented by the Priestess. And then you have the card Strength in the original Rider-Waite deck. And in the Thoth deck, that card is called Lust. Then you also have in the Rider-Waite deck, you have the Wheel of Fortune. And in the Thoth deck, it's called Fortune. In the Rider-Waite deck, you have Justice as a major arcana card. And in the Thoth deck, that's called Adjustment. In the Rider-Waite deck, you have Temperance. And in the Thoth deck, the Temperance card is called Art. And then in the Rider-Waite deck, you have Judgment. And in the Thoth deck, that's called it's the Eon. We'll talk about that card. Anyway, and then in the Rider-Waite deck, you have the World card, the major arcana called the World. And in the Thoth deck, it's called the Universe. So he takes the number, the Roman numeral. Actually, let's go over the zodiac sign. He takes the zodiac sign, Aquarius, and he says that the Emperor represents Aquarius in the Thoth deck, which it does not. In tropical astrology and in the original Memluk decks and the original tarot decks, including the Rider-Waite deck, the Emperor is represented by Aries. And so, like I said, Aries and Aquarius are switched. Then you have Libra, which is represented by Adjustment, which we know in the original tarot deck, it's called Justice. It's not called Adjustment, but Libra is the same zodiac sign either way. And then you have Strength, which is represented by Leo. And in this case, Lust is represented by Leo. And then you have the Star. And the Star is represented by Aries in the Thoth deck, but in the original Rider-Waite deck and the Memluk cards, it is represented by Aquarius. So you have Aquarius and Aries that are switched. In the original Rider-Waite and Memluk deck, the Emperor is Aries and the Star is Aquarius. In the Thoth deck, the Emperor is represented by Aquarius and the Star is represented by Aries. So, the Star is referred to Aquarius in the original deck, and now in this deck you have that swapped. So the same thing goes once again. The reason that he says that that's creating a loop and his whole double loop idea is that now Aries and Aquarius are on each side of Pisces, just as Leo and Libra are on each side of Virgo. So the correction in the Book of Law gives perfect symmetry in the zodiac attribution, basically meaning that Crowley was trying to create perfect symmetry within the zodiac of the Thoth deck and believed that in order to do that, you needed Aquarius and Aries on either side of Pisces, just as in the original, Leo and Libra are on either side of Virgo. And so he changed it to create a perfect double loop. So I'm going to screen, see. I'm going to take a picture of this for you so you guys can have it, and I'll put it in our study guide. I'm going to put all of my notes in the study guide, but this graph is just nice to have, and I'll send it right now. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so then we have the names of court cards. So Crowley accepted the Golden Dawn's changed names of all the court cards, which can cause some confusion for people who are used to more common decks. Specifically, since he changed the structure of the court cards. While each of the places retains much of the original meaning, there are subtle differences. So, for example, in the Rider-Waite deck and the Mamluk cards and the traditional tarot cards, you have the king, the queen, the knight, and the page. In the Thoth deck, you have the knight, which you have the knight instead of the king. You have the prince instead of the knight, and you have the princess instead of the page. And for any of you who have spent a lot of time with tarot, you can tell that a lot of modernized decks that were created, in the 1980s, the 1990s, and further on, have taken some inspiration from Crowley's Thoth deck. And sometimes you'll see princess used instead of page a lot in newer decks, especially the ones that are trying to go with a theme. So like, for example, if you have like a Game of Thrones deck or a Nightmare Before Christmas deck, or I have like the Neopets deck. And if you have one of those decks, a lot of times they like to use princess because page is not as common of a word in the United States and in westernized culture.
I have a Pokemon deck.
Oh, that's awesome. I want a Pokemon deck. That is so cool.
Found it on Etsy.
Nice. One of my friends got me the Neopets deck for my birthday, and I was so excited.
I want a Nightmare Before Christmas one so bad.
That's awesome. Yes, the themed decks are super cool. I think they're amazing. I think that obviously, some of the artists just go out to create a tarot deck and they're not actually tarot readers. So sometimes a problem that you'll find is like, for example, I have the Nightmare Before Christmas deck, and you can tell that they don't really understand the symbolism. So the cards are just pretty. They don't actually have any tarot symbolism on them. They don't know the symbolism for the number 5, like the 5 of Pentacles. They don't know the symbolism for Pentacles. So they just drew a pretty deck, but that's okay. That's fine. Art is art, and that's totally fine.
Like, I want it strictly for aesthetic purposes, like not to actually do readings, just to have it.
Yeah, same. That's a lot of times why I do it, because I collect decks. And so a lot of times I just have them to display because they're pretty. And then the ones that I actually use are the ones that are based in symbology and were created by actual like tarot experts who understand the symbology. One of the ones that I suggest if you're looking for a deck that really, really shows off the symbology really well and was created by somebody who's actually a tarot reader, but it's also beautiful, is the Shadowscape deck. The Shadowscape deck is one of the prettiest decks I've ever seen, and the symbology is amazing. It's on point perfectly. It's so good. So yeah, the Shadowscape deck is amazing. But yes, so now you guys know the difference between the original tarot decks and the Thoth deck when it comes to the major arcana, when it comes to the astrology, and now you know when it comes to the court cards what the differences are. So now we're going to move on to the minor arcana and what the differences are there. So Basically, he changed all of this. The minor arcana are just wrong, in my opinion, but obviously you can debate that and say that they're not wrong, Alex. They're just different, and that's okay. But it doesn't make any sense, in my opinion, because tarot is supposed to be based off of Middle Eastern numerology. And, okay, Egypt uses ancient Arabian numerology because Egypt and ancient Arabia have been not only like trading with each other, and then just people migrate back and forth from those two places for thousands and thousands of years. So the numerology is incredibly similar between North African numerology and Middle Eastern numerology. The indigenous mysticism there and numerology there is almost identical. There are some changes due to language, and due to like the different, like the language barrier between Arabic and different North African languages. But Arabic is very similar to different North African languages. So it makes no sense to me why they changed the minor arcana so much, but they did. They changed it so much. It's so different. So basically what Crowley did is purposely confuse the crap out of you for no reason. So let's start with wands. So when we start with wands, we have the number 1. And the number 1, luckily, did not change. Neither did the element. So wands still represent fire. Fire still represents the same thing as it does in original tarot. If you don't know what that means, go watch my tarot classes. They're on YouTube. Go to the DiviNation YouTube channel. Click on tarot and read the introduction to minor arcana. And watch the introduction to minor arcana. Or go to the website and look there. We will talk about it in this class, but not right now. We have a lot to cover. So wands are still fire. Fire still means the same thing. And number 1 is still the same exact meaning. Now, then you get to number 2. And number 2, for some strange reason, represents dominion. For those of you who have taken my class, you know that is not what 2 represents. And it also represents Mars and Aries, which numerology in ancient Arabia and also ancient Egypt never ever represented a tropical astrology sign, ever. So it's ridiculous, but that's fine. So number 2 represents Aries, and it represents, the 2 of Wands. The 2 of Wands represents Aries, Mars, and Dominion. And if you would like to take notes, you can, but also I will be sending this, all of these notes will be on the website. Don't worry. And I just have them, I made little charts for you so that you can, have all of this laid out for you very easily. If you would like to take notes, you can, but this will be on the website for you. Anyway, number 3 of Wands is also represented by Aries. Like, how ridiculous is that? Anyway, it's represented, the 3 of Wands is represented by Aries. It's also represented by the sun, and it's defined as virtue. Number 4 of Wands is also Aries, represented by Venus, and it's defined as completion. Number 5 is represented by Leo, Saturn, and strife. Number 6 is Leo, Jupiter, and victory. The 7 of Wands is Leo, Mars, and valor. Number 8 of Wands is Sagittarius, Mercury, and swiftness. The number 9 of Wands is Sagittarius, Moon, and strength. And the 10 of Wands is Sagittarius, Saturn, and oppression. So, I am going to do something really quick. So we are going to okay, so I'm going to share screens really quick, and we are going to pull up our document. Okay. And share screens. Okay. So for reference, I will link this to you now so you don't just have to follow along with me. Let me link it in the chat. Hold on. First, let's put this at the bottom.
This is a wild list that I'm currently reading.
Yep, isn't it?
I'm sorry. Orgasm was the first thing that I saw.
Yep.
Okay.
Just hold on. Wait a second. Okay. So, let me link this to you. You'll see what this is, Robin. You helped make this.
Did I?
Yeah, you were in one of the classes that helped make this.
No. Okay.
Right? You were in like one of the numerology classes or the dice reading classes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's where we made that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just sitting here playing a game, trying to back my truck up, and I look over and see the word orgasm. Like, excuse me? I almost said it in my game. Orgasm, what?
So for example, just to show you guys kind of the difference that we're looking at here, for those of you who have never taken one of my numerology classes or my tarot classes, the original Memlook cards. And the original Memlook cards are the ancient Arabian tarot cards that existed thousands of years ago. And they were the very first tarot cards ever made. They were found in Iran, Afghanistan, and China, I'm pretty sure, about 4,000 years ago, something like that. I don't quote me on that. I have to look that up, but I'm pretty sure that's, yeah. So those cards specifically were based off of ancient Arabic numerology. The way that you read tarot, the way that you read original tarot, that has nothing to do with the Thoth deck, original ancient Arabian tarot, that is the basis for what we use today in tarot cards. So if you've ever seen a tarot deck, that tarot deck is based off of the ancient Mamluk cards. And tarot reading began and started in ancient Arabia. And they used ancient Arabic numerology in order to read tarot. And what they did was, so the minor arcana, what you do to read a minor arcana card is you take the suit, meaning pentacles, wands, chalices, and swords. Those are the suits. You take the suit, and every single suit has a corresponding element. And then you take the number of the card. So let's say you have the Four of Pentacles. Pentacles is represented by Earth. Earth means anything that you can touch, anything that exists in the physical realm. So Earth is your car, your house, your clothes, your food, your money. It is animals, your family, your friends. It is trees and plants and flowers and mountains. It is everything that you can touch. And four is represented, and that's why I brought this up for you. So this is what four means. And these are some examples of what four can mean in your tarot reading. So in order to read the tarot card, it's very simple when it comes to minor arcana. You just take the meaning of the suit, which in this case would be earth because it's pentacles, and you pair it with the meaning of the number. So the Four of Pentacles means stability and rest, introspection and solitude within everything that you can touch that exists within the physical realm. And that is how you read the minor arcana. That is how they have been reading the minor arcana for 4,000 years. Okay. So then Crowley came, created the Thoth deck. And now we're going to scroll down here. So remember, as I said, wands. Okay. This is the chart that I'm going to send all of you guys for each of the minor arcana. This is the Thoth deck. So, wands, he kept all the elements the same, luckily. So, but wands in tarot, all tarot, is represented by fire. Fire is your motivation, your actions, your passion. It is your will and your spark, your energy. It is what makes you excited, what makes you filled with passion and excitement and motivation. It's what makes you want to act every day. And it is, so that is fire. So Crowley decided that the one, or the ace of wands, meaning the number one of fire. So the way that you would originally read this, an original ancient Arabic tarot, is by taking the number one and the meaning behind the number one and pairing it with motivation and passion and love and excitement and action and magic and divination and everything that has energy and passion behind it. You would take that and pair it with the number one to get your definition of that card. And Crowley decided that that definition is the root of the powers of fire. And when I tell you that he did not give much of an explanation of that, I mean it. This chart is, I'm not using one word just to try and give you a keyword. Crowley didn't give huge, gigantic definitions for each one of these cards. He did during his sermons and his speeches and the things that he would say to his Thelema cult. And he gave like big, giant definitions of the cards. But when you really sit down and like read the Book of Thoth, there aren't huge definitions for these cards. And he doesn't give you much meaning behind why the Egyptian version of this card would mean that and why it differs from the Middle Eastern version. He doesn't really give much of an answer to that. And in my opinion, I think that's because he didn't know and he was making it up as he went along. But there are many interpretations of why Crowley didn't give huge explanations for why the Egyptian definition is so much different than the Middle Eastern one, even though those two cultures in, thousands of years ago were extremely intertwined. So to give you kind of a very quick example of the difference, we have, let's take the number 2 because he gives us a little bit more with the number 2. He gives us an astrological sign. He gives us Aries. He gives us a deacon. He gives us Mars. And he gives us the definitive word dominion. So the number 2 of wands in the Thoth tarot deck is represented by Aries. And what do we know about Aries? Actually, yeah, why don't you guys tell me? Because this is one of the only definitions that you'll truly get from Crowley unless you read more into his whole definition. But anyway, if I tell you that the 2 of wands is represented by Aries and Mars, and its definition is dominion, what do you think that the 2 of wands represents in a reading?
I heard dominion, and the first thing I thought of is being a top, being dominated.
Very nice. Yeah, totally.
And I don't know where that came from, but yeah, I heard dominion. I was like, yes, you're not my real dom.
Honestly, though, I think that if I was to read the word Dominion and then Aries and Mars and fire, I would also think a top. Yeah, I would agree
I
with
domination. So I guess that fits just in a different way. I was thinking more of war, like over and dominating countries and religions and just people, subjugating them to horrendous acts, just completely dominating someone and just
Good
taking over.
gods.
Yes. I totally agree with you too because of Mars and Aries. Exactly. Because Mars is the god of war. I mean, Mars
Yes.
is the god of many things, but war is one of them. And Aries once again has that huge dominating power to them, and also kind of one of the more destructive sides of Aries is their need and want for war and for conflict and for power and domination. So yeah, totally, I agree with you. Let me check the chat really quick to see if anybody wrote in the chat. Nope. Okay, cool. Oh. Yes, Paul. I know they're just different. I am a nerd. I know, but when I show you what I mean, because I'm about to show you what I mean, okay, it's there. It's so different that it almost feels like he's negating the legitimacy of Middle Eastern tarot, which is frustrating. But anyway, you're right. You're right. It is just different. You're right.
So he's trying to overshadow and make it better to his standards.
Yes, exactly. Which in it doesn't that's not necessarily a bad thing. We are talking about mysticism, we are talking about occultism, things that develop and evolve and grow over time. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, because Crowley had a different idea of how tarot should be read, that he was wrong. I am just very opinionated, and I really like Middle Eastern tarot. And it's the original one, and I mean it's ancient and 4,000 years old, and it's the one that we've been using since the dawning of tarot and mysticism and numerology and astrology. And I'm also Middle Eastern. And so but Crowley was not wrong.
Say that it's wrong, but what I would say is it's to a point that it's disrespectful.
I agree. I thank you. Exactly. I completely agree. Thank you.
For trying to improve it in his own way. He's not wrong for taking a different approach, but it's highly disrespectful.
It is. It really is. Because, okay, so now that I've shown you the number 2, let me show you what I mean. Okay. So number 2 of Wands. We all discussed what that means in our head and kind of how that translates when you say that it means dominion and Mars and Aries. Let me show you the Middle Eastern version, the original version. Okay. This is the definition of the number 2. So remember how you would read it is wands represent fire. So wands represent, motivation and passion and action and excitement and all those things. And you would take that and pair it with the definition of the number 2. And this is the definition of the number 2.
So it's the opposite. Instead of destruction, it's creation.
Exactly. Thank you. Exactly.
Completely around.
Yes. Yes, he did. And I'm so mad about it. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Why do that? And then to say that the reason that you did that was because it's Egyptian, Doesn't make any sense because Egyptian numerology and ancient Arabian numerology are almost identical to each other. Now, when we take Egyptian astrology, that would be different. But notice how Crowley is not using Egyptian astrology. He's using tropical astrology. He's using Aries. So he's not even using Egyptian astrology. So there's no basis in fact or culture or anything in this deck at all. We're going to go over the good sides of the deck. Right now we're going over the parts that don't make any sense to me. But there's no basis in real culture. There's no basis in real actual indigenous practices. It's just, in my opinion, looked very much like Crowley was just wanting to make up his own deck, which is fine, but don't call it Egyptian tarot because it's not.
Two in traditional tarot is one of my favorites to pop up. That 2 and 3, I find huge connections to. So just seeing the fact that he completely flipped it around is almost aggravating.
It is so aggravating. So yes. So in traditional tarot, the Two of Wands has many interpretations, but the way that I interpret it is to be either it is two actions coming together to make one. It is your excitement, your passion, your creativity, your love and spark and energy coming together through so many actions that you have done and so much hard work and effort that you have put in. They are coming together to truly create a path for you to grow in life based on your goals and based on the question that you ask the cards, and that the actions that you're doing and the hard work that you're putting in are paying off. You are making the correct decisions, and that your passion and creativity and love and energy and excitement and motivation are paying off and working together to help you reach the end point, or at least to help you create a path that is going to lead you to accomplish what it is that you are set out to accomplish. Also, alternatively, because of the number 2 having so much to do with decision making, that the Two of Wands can also be representative of a decision that you need to make with your actions, that you have made so many actions, that you have worked so hard, and you have a big decision coming up when it comes to your motivation and actions and your passion and creativity and love, and that you have a really big decision to make, and that is going to seriously affect the actions that you make in the future. So yes. And also there are many, many more definitions. I could go on and on about the number 2 of Wands. That's just my very dry basic. Obviously, I've given tons of examples here of what it can mean, and there's so much more to 2, but 2 is so much more about decision making and creation and empathy, and it's about relationships and working together and building and creating. And 2 has such a deep duality to it. It has so much meaning to it that has to do with building and creating with others and making decisions that affect others and the rest of the world. That to call it dominion, to call it domination, to call it war and destruction, that's so sad, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. But
it's genuinely depressing because it takes the harmony out of it and turns it into chaos.
exactly.
It completely.
Exactly. I agree entirely. I'm so happy you agree. Yes, exactly.
That the number 2 and 3 are like my favorite numbers that pop up because they're what I specialize in, and it's just mm.
Right? Oh, agreed. And numerology is one of my favorite things to practice ever. And I'm so happy that you're into it too. I love numerology so much. And I love math, like sacred math with it, and sacred geometry. And it is just so cool to understand the mysticism behind geometry, math, and numerology and numbers. And Crowley just kind of, I don't know, he kind of shattered the indigenous meanings. That doesn't mean that you're not allowed within mysticism to create and define your own way of doing magic. It is always okay to do magic in your own way. It's always okay to be a chaos magician and to create your own path and to do your own thing and to be an eclectic witch. Those things are always okay. But I feel like Crowley took it a little bit too far, to the point that he's being a little disrespectful to indigenous Middle Eastern people and ancient Arabian people who created numerology. And it's especially, if he would have just, one thing could have changed my opinion. If instead of calling it Egyptian, he would have just called it Crowley magic. Okay? Just call it Crowley magic. And then it's like, all right, cool, it's just Crowley magic. But instead he called it Egyptian, which Egypt is super, super tied to ancient Arabia. And to do that, it also is disrespectful to Egypt. And so that's just fucked. So
Maybe it just more than just a little disrespectful. Maybe a lot disrespectful.
Yeah, maybe a lot disrespectful. Exactly. So yes, then we get to the number 3. We're not going to go through all of them. I do want to, okay, actually, instead of covering the number 3, because we're just going to say the same thing, because once again, he's just doing the same thing. Number 3, we have the sun and Aries and virtue. And that is, once again, very intense. Aries, to bring Aries into the number 3, to bring the sun in, those are very intense, fiery, dominating, destructive, and zodiac signs and astrological entities. And I'm not saying they don't have a place. I could see Aries representing the number 5. I could see Aries representing the number 9. You know, 2 and 3 are just not those numbers. But if we go on to kind of look at one of the other differences, like let's look at, let's, let's look at 10. Okay. So if I was to say, for those of you, or okay, question to everyone, looking at the number 10 here, the 10 of Wands. Okay. So taking the number 10, pairing it with fire and deciding what that means. And Crowley has decided that the 10 of Wands represents oppression, Saturn, and Sagittarius. What are your thoughts? And what do you think that means? And just like, what are your thoughts in general about that?
It's wrong.
It is wrong.
It takes the original meaning of finally coming to your happy ending and reaching your end of your journey and finally being healed to, oh, you're now in the thick of it. You are now depressed and in the worst position that you could possibly be in your life.
Exactly. And like the number 10 does have, there is a place for the number 10 to be a number that I loved your, by the way, I loved your description of the number 10. That was beautiful. That was so exactly what I would have said. But there are Middle Eastern and ancient indigenous definitions of the number 10 that can represent the end being sad. That, you know, yes, you have come to completion, you have completed what you set out to do. The end is here, and that can be beautiful and relieving and incredible, but it can also be hard. It can be there is sadness there and within that number, because even if the end is happy, for example, if the 10 represents graduation, the 10 represents, let's say graduating from college or high school, you are super proud of yourself, you worked extremely hard to get there, that is incredible, and that is represented by the number 10. But saying goodbye to your friends, saying goodbye to your teachers, saying goodbye to your school, and figuring out what you're going to do next is scary and overwhelming and can be sad. So there are sad parts to the number 10 and to completion, and but that's not oppression. What the fuck? Where does oppression come from in that? There is what? It doesn't make any sense.
Look, he pairs it. It's a multiple of 2. So he likes being oppressed when he's being dominated. Obviously. Because 4 is completion.
I know. And how is 4
6 is victory.
I know.
And look, then swiftness. If you dominate, he completes swiftly and oppressively.
Crowley. Fucking
I'm gonna get
Crowley.
roasted online.
Oh,
you're gonna post this to YouTube and I'm gonna get flamed.
Oh, whatever. I think that about so many of my videos about myself. I'm like, these people are gonna yell at me, but it's fine. But then to add Sagittarius, because oh no, go ahead.
Earlier, Professor Paul said Crowley the Kingster, and Robin just keeps adding to it, and I am living for it.
Yes, that is awesome, and it's so true too. Crowley is very big on putting sex into every single aspect of magic, which I have no problem with at all. I think that sex and magic go hand in hand, obviously. At least that's very obvious in my opinion. And
every once in a while, you just have to light a candle and have some orgasm magic.
Right, exactly. That's what I was just going to say, though, is that when I say sex, I don't necessarily mean intercourse with another being. I just mean passion and orgasm, and there's so much more to sex than just like having intercourse with another person. Sex, yeah.
It's the same thing with relationships. Relationships doesn't have to mean between you and another person. It could be you and yourself, you and your higher self, you and your cat, you and the universe, you and anything.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, so much yes. Exactly.
That's what I was trying to find the words for earlier when I said the fact that I specialize in relationships. Like, that's just, I don't know. That's the reason why I like the number 2 so much, but I will stop yapping now.
No, me too. That's one of the reasons I love the number 2. And yes, to read the chat too. Yes, Paul. In Egyptian numerology, 2 represents duality. And like I said, Egyptian numerology and Arabian numerology are not exactly identical, but they are pretty much identical. If you look at my Middle Eastern definition, duality was in there. Duality was a huge part of the definition. It's just not all of it. And so they are extremely similar, to the point that it would take somebody who is a scholar of numerology to truly tell the difference between ancient Egyptian numerology and ancient Arabian numerology, because on surface level, they're the same thing. You would have to dig very deep. You would have to really become a scholar in numerology to truly see the differences. Because yes, in Egyptian numerology, 2 is represented by duality and balance. And then in Arabian numerology, duality and balance are within the definition. There's also a lot more to the definition. Because you also have this idea of decision making, you also have the idea of relationships and of working together and teamwork and of friendship and love. And there's a lot, there's more to the 2 in Arabian numerology. But yeah, exactly. So, but none of that is domination. Nowhere in any of those definitions is domination. So it's just, yeah, doesn't make any fucking sense. But, and then so let's do the same thing we did. Obviously I wrote these definitions, so they're not like perfect. I don't know. They're my definitions. But this is the number 10 in Arabian numerology. And like I said, inside the 10 in Arabian numerology, you do have sadness sometimes. You do have anger sometimes, because sometimes the end is hard, even if it's wonderful, even if you feel accomplished, the end is hard. And sometimes the end is death also. And there's that. Sometimes you die at the end. But nowhere in the 10 in Arabian numerology, anywhere is oppression. There's not oppression. This is so silly.
Kind of reminds me of the Tower from the Major Arcana. They have very, at least to me, they have very similar meanings. A turning point in your life, not necessarily having to be an end of something. That's where they would be different, but they share the similarity of a turning point, a drastic change, and it not necessarily having to be good or bad. It could be both. It could be one or the other. It's just something drastically changing.
Yes, no, definitely. I agree. Oh, that's you. You have to come to my tarot classes. You're awesome. Oh, yes. So yes, exactly. I agree. Exactly.
I really
And
love, very passionate about it.
I love that. Oh, thank you. Me too.
I like that everyone assumes that the tower is bad, but it's not. Quit
Yeah,
tripping.
it doesn't have to be. There are definitely times where getting the tower, depending on the question that you asked, is not like the best thing. Definitely. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means that sometimes change and having a lot of the things within your life kind of break down and change around you is not always comfortable for everyone.
Like getting the
yeah.
That's another one. The its typical meanings are like addiction and strife and gluttony, but there's also the drastic change of those addictions coming to an end, of the changing for the better, um, steering away from those sins and those just overall nuances that you wanted to change. But depending on the question you ask, that's not a card that you want to show up.
Right. Exactly. I love the way that you explain that. Totally. So, yes, these are the differences that we see within wands. Yes. So now we are going, I really want I really like jumping back and forth because I want to go over with you all the differences within the minor arcana, but that would take the rest of class and more. So I really want to discuss something else with you tonight as well. So we're going to jump a little bit. So those are the differences with that. I am going to post the charts, like the chart that I just posted. I'm going to post that for everything. So like this chart that I just posted here for wands, I'm going to show you that chart for pentacles, swords, chalices, and so on, and give you Crowley's definition and Crowley's astrological signs for each one. And we are going to discuss the differences between that and traditional tarot, just like we have. But there is something I wanted to go over during this class as well that's a little bit, I think, is more fun now that we've done that. Okay. So we are going to discuss, and I promise there's a reason. So for those who, first of all, who here knows what the 7 hermetic laws are? Or I guess, okay, there are a lot of hermetic laws. Who knows what the hermetic laws are? Okay, well, good, because you're going to learn today.
I'm just gonna stay quiet on this one.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking, I was like, why didn't Paul answer? I know you know.
I did answer in chat.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me see that. I wasn't looking. I was trying to look for the little thingy I have. Oh, you. Okay, please tell me. Tell me, Paul. What are the hermetic laws while I look for my slideshow?
Okay, so the first law is the principle of mentalism. All is in the mind, and the universe is mental. Basically, foundation principle. It gets to the fact of everything is based in reality of the mind, the universal consciousness, that kind of thing. Second one is principles of correspondence. As within, so without. As without, so within. Law 3 is principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Rule 4, principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has a pair of opposites, like, unlike, dark, light, yada, yada, yada. Principle of rhythm. Yeah, polarity, rhythm. Everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. Like, for instance, if you've got a pendulum, if you hold it, obviously, and then you take it from the left-hand side and let it drop, it will drop. It will swing to the exact same height on the right-hand side on the first swing. Number 6 is the principle of cause and effect. Cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. 7 is 7 gender?
From what I know, 6 is gender and 7 is cause and effect. But I mean, either way, it's yeah.
Right. Sorry, I may well have got them in the wrong order.
Oh, that's fine. Me too, honestly.
I'm going from memory. So principle of gender as either 6 or 7. Everything has its masculine, feminine principles. And also gender manifests itself on all planes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yes. So, yeah.
Can I have it written out and sent to me? I would love to put them in my grimoire.
Yes, definitely. So this slideshow that I have pulled up for you right here is already on the website. So you can totally print this worksheet out that I have right here. It is up on the website, and you can go to the slideshow and click on it.
I can take you a tour. I can give you a tour around the DiviNation Academy website when we make your account.
Yes. And then it's, if you click on study guides and you go into Hermeticism, this is listed already as the slideshow, and you can click on this worksheet and it pops up as an image and you can print it out. Can you guys see my screen? Am I talking about a worksheet that nobody can see?
We can see it. Well, at
Okay.
least I can.
Good. Good.
Yeah,
I can see the 7 hermetic laws there.
Perfect. So this worksheet, actually, funny enough, and I'm so shocked I found it. I got so excited. I posted this slideshow like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. It was one of the very first things to go up on the website, because this worksheet that I took a picture of, and then I wrote this whole slideshow about it, but is a worksheet that I got when I was 6 years old studying under Rena. And she gave us all this worksheet. That is why it looks all like, you can tell it's kind of crinkled and a lot of the words are fading, is because it's old. It's not supposed to be that way. I didn't get this off the internet. It's not. It was a worksheet created by Rena Shesso. That's why actually you can see where I scribbled off rhythm on the measured is, and she made a typo and I scratched it out and wrote is. So yeah, this is a worksheet I got from Rena Shesso when I was 6 and studying the Hermetic laws as a little baby child. So the Hermetic laws were, of course, appreciated and a huge part of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is one of the reasons that we're discussing them, is because the Hermetic laws were a big part of the spirituality and ideology behind the creation of the Thoth deck. Because the Mamluk cards and the ancient Arabian tarot and the original tarot cards from 4,000 years ago that we all know about, and that most of us have seen, those Hermeticism would have been around-ish, but because Hermeticism is a mixture of Greek and Egyptian theology, Hermeticism wasn't really necessarily a thing that had been mixed and discussed and talked about as a whole. You had the mysticism of Greece and you had the mysticism of Egypt. And so technically Hermeticism did exist, but the way that it exists today, the way that the Golden Dawn talks about it, the way that occultism and modern neo-paganism talk about Hermeticism would not have existed during the creation of the original Mamluk cards. So this is specific and special to the Thoth deck. And one of the things that I actually like about the Thoth deck, which is why I wanted to end the class with this, because even though I highly dislike the minor arcana of the Thoth deck, it is ridiculous. The major arcana is not as ridiculous. And that is where the Hermetic laws come into play, is that Crowley used Hermeticism and the Hermetic laws to create the spirituality behind the major arcana of the Thoth deck. And I appreciate the major arcana of the Thoth deck way more than the minor arcana, because the major arcana, number one, are much newer in general. The ancient Mamluk cards that I'm talking about would have never included the major arcana. Original tarot did not have the major arcana. So when we talk about indigenous tarot, we talk about tarot from 4,000 years ago, we talk about ancient mysticism revolving around tarot, the major arcana would never have been a part of that. They were not, major arcana was not created until tarot went from the Middle East to Italy. And the way that it went there was not cultural appropriation. It was not stolen. The Arabs really liked sharing. And one of the very first trade routes in the world was the trade route between not only India and Europe, but the Middle East and Europe. And so the Middle East during trade routes, and while people were talking on ships and talking at in just talking on trade routes, Tarot became something that was spread via trade routes back during the Silk Road and during trade between the Middle East and Europe. So that we are talking about much, 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 much later, way after the creation of the Mamluk cards, way after the creation of ancient numerology. We have trade that begins and the Silk Road and the trade that begins between India, the Middle East, and Europe. And that is when the major arcana cards got added to the tarot deck in Italy. And that is why when you look at a deck of tarot cards and you see how the major arcana have things like a high priest, a high priestess, an emperor, a fool, they seem much different. They seem like ideologies and pictures and artwork and theology that wouldn't have existed 4,000 years ago. And that's why, is because it didn't. It didn't exist 4,000 years ago. It was much newer, and it was created by Italy and had a huge influence from the Strega witches of Italy. And so then you have Crowley and his creation of the Thoth deck. And then he added his own version of the major arcana. And I find that to be much less disrespectful because it's not an indigenous practice. It is not an ancient indigenous practice. It is not cultural appropriation. It was something that was created in more modern times in Italy. When I say modern, we're still talking about a good 2,000 years ago, but still. So yes, the creation of the major arcana in the Thoth deck used the 7 Hermetic laws. And we're going to talk about the 7 Hermetic laws. Every pagan spirituality believes in very similar laws of the universe. And when I say that, I am talking about modern paganism. And when I say modern, I mean within the last 1,000 years. So within the last 1,000 years, you get a lot of pagan spiritualities that are going to have very similar ideologies. If you go back far enough, of course, pagan spirituality has existed since since the dawning of civilization, because we're just talking about, honoring the sun, honoring the stars, tracking the stars, building structures that honor and worship the stars and the sun. And we are talking about, the worship of fire and things like that. And so those types of pagan spiritualities that have existed since the dawning of civilization did not have the similar ideologies to the Hermetic laws. But if we talk about the last 1,000 years and paganism as a whole, all different kinds of tribes and indigenous cultures from all over the world all have very similar theology and surrounding this. And that's not to say that any of them knew about Hermeticism. That's not to say that Hermeticism itself isn't cultural appropriation, because in my opinion, I do believe that a lot of Hermeticism is cultural appropriation, and there's a lot of nuance when we talk about Hermeticism. But it is very interesting that a lot of pagan spiritualities across the world for the last 1,000 years have all had very similar theology when it comes to kind of these laws of nature and how they worship and respect nature, and the different ways in which we understand ancient physics, ancient chemistry, ancient alchemy, and the different laws that had to be followed when practicing ancient alchemy and ancient chemistry and ancient mysticism and ancient physics. And a lot of pagan societies and cultures were some of the very first scientists, the very first chemists, the very first physicists. It was just called different things. And a lot of them understood in different ways these laws of nature. And this is one way that they have been described and explained, is through Hermeticism. But I encourage you to do a lot of research on Hermeticism because there's a lot of cultural appropriation, there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of things to discuss and talk about. Hermeticism is not all good, Hermeticism is not all bad. It is not just the combining of Egyptian and Greek mysticism. There's a lot that happened, and there's a lot of colonization, oppression, war, slavery, and appropriation that happened during the creation of Hermeticism. So, we have the law of mentalism. And I think Paul did an amazing job of describing these. We're just going to kind of go over it again. But the law of mentalism is that the universe is made up of minds or ideas in minds. So one way to describe this is that, you know, that funny thing that humans talk about where we say that there are no new ideas, that all ideas are just us gaining inspiration from someone else's idea, and that therefore there are no new ideas, that we all just gained inspiration from something that we saw. We can't create a new animal. The only thing you can do is take a whole bunch of things that you already know, that you've already seen, that you can already imagine, that you already have in your imagination, in your brain, and mush them together to create a new animal. But you're not really creating anything new. You are just using other people's minds, other people's imagination, and what you've seen with your own eyes to create something new. And so that the universe is just made up of one mind. And it's also this idea as well that thought and perception are what create the world. So your world is separate from my world because it's all based on your own mind and your own perception. The world doesn't actually exist. All it exists is your eyeballs and their ability to process light, and then your brain's ability to then perceive that light and decide what it is. There is no fact, there is no real. There is just what your brain perceives and what your eyeballs are able to how your eyeballs are able to perceive light. And there is no reality. There is only minds and perception. But now that I've told you what the law of mentalism kind of means to me and what I have talked about, what does the law of mentalism mean to you?
I would say pretty much the same thing that you said, that no one has an original idea or an original thought. Everything is derived from another person or another thing gaining inspiration from another person or another thing. I recently learned that my mom was Wiccan, and I am now realizing that she has been teaching me these since I was very little, without me even realizing it.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
Okay, I guess I'll go.
Yay!
I can see you looking at the screen going, come on, come on. Okay, so in order to understand where I'm coming from, you need to understand a little bit about me. And that is, a lot of my practice is alchemy based. And yes, hermetics plays an important part of alchemy, but alchemy also plays an important part in hermetics. So when I think about the principle of mentalism, I tend to think about the mind and the fact that it has creative power. And through that power, you can bring in not only energy, but also matter. So to me, I always put it down to a math equation. For instance, when we're talking about manifestation, okay, that's the principle of mentalism, because you have to have inspiration, you then have to have thought, you then have to have intent, and when you combine all of that, you get manifestation. So it all starts in the mind. So that's where I tie in the principle of mentalism. If that makes sense.
Oh no, that makes total sense. And I'm so happy that you went there with it, because my definitions are always very based in, I don't know, they're based a little bit more in like physical philosophy, where you brought it back to magic and alchemy and witchcraft. And I love that. Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
You know me, Alex. If I can throw alchemy into it, I will do. I mean,
I know, and that's amazing. That's why I always love it when you talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to shut back up again.
Oh. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to add about the law of mentalism? Okay. So then we have the law of correspondence. And this one, I love this one because honestly, it gets thrown around so much. It does. I mean, at any Wiccan festival, pagan festival, anything that has to do with mysticism at all, you are going to get somebody who is going to inevitably say, as above, so below. As below, so above. But what does that mean? And that was a question to you. What does that mean to you?
Is this where I start speaking again?
Yes, if you want to.
Oh, okay. Oh, God. Okay, so I am famous for doing exactly what Alex said. If somebody starts talking to me about alchemy, I bring in the correlation between as above, so below, and so below, as so above. I like to take it to the other twist, which is as within, so without, as without, so within. So I think about correspondences and the harmony that you have between different planes of existence, physical, mental, spiritual, patterns that you can find in the macrocosm or the universe, whatever you want to call it, or in the microcosm, as in the individual. How does the individual tie to the universe? How does the universe tie to the individual? Where is that interaction? There's always a correspondence in one way or another. You've heard you may well have heard the term, oh, I was that high, I was hearing Koa, or, something along those lines. Well, if you think about it, it's frequency. So there is a direct correspondence between the frequency of sound and the frequency of color. It's all about finding the correspondence between not necessarily one thing, but several things at the same time. Like, for instance, when I get up in the morning and I make coffee, why do I stir clockwise? But when I wash my clock, I go anti-clockwise. Because I'm getting rid of the bad when I go anti-clockwise, and then I'm putting the positivity in when I go clockwise. So it's that, the tie between the two. I'm done.
That was amazing. That was one of the best mystical explanations that I've ever heard of the law of correspondence. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was lovely. Thank you. Does anybody else have a their own interpretation of the law of correspondence? As above, so below.
But I don't know how to follow that up. I would honestly say that for me, it always meant, I guess, kind of like the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have do unto you. It's put out into the world what you want to receive. It's all about the give and take, the push and pull of the energy that you push out is the energy that you will receive back. And I guess it kind of like, I forget who exactly stated it. I don't remember if it was you, Alex, or Professor Paul, but it comes back down to manifestation. What you want is what you will receive if that is the energy you put out into the universe. But it's the same thing with, if you want someone to treat you a certain way, you treat them that certain way, and you are more likely to get it back in return. It's, as I have already stated, it's all about the push and pull, the give and take.
Yes. I love that. That's exactly too. That's kind of
That's
closer.
amazing.
It is. That's so, and that's closer to how I have described it in the past. And I love how you use that.
Y'all just kind of explaining yin and yang, it seems like.
Totally. And yin and yang is totally a part of the law of correspondence. Yes. And used a lot to represent the law of correspondence. Yes. Definitely. And that I don't even have anything to add other than what both of you said. My answer was a mixture of what Paul said and what Salem said. So that's amazing. Yes, that was beautiful. Thank you guys so much. Yes. And then we have the law of vibration. And this one is, I love the law of vibration, but I feel like it is misunderstood a lot, because of course, especially in modern neo-paganism, because in modern neo-paganism, what I hear a lot, which I'm not saying this is wrong, this is a beautiful definition for it, but a lot of times what I hear is the definition relating to vibration on a spiritual level, where people discuss and talk about high vibration and low vibration, and putting high vibration into the universe, and that being better than low vibration. And that everybody has their own frequency, that stones and crystals and the universe and trees and have their own frequency and vibration. And they're talking about it in a very metaphorical and mystical way that is very based on metaphysics. But the way that I'm not saying that's the wrong definition. I think that's a beautiful definition. But what I also want to bring people back to and remind everyone of is that the law of vibration remember, these were also ancient physicists. These were ancient scientists. And we are also talking about the fact that literally in science, molecules are always moving. So when we talk about everything
I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, exactly. That molecules within everything are vibrating. So I don't know, let's go back to second grade real quick and we learn about water and solid or liquid, solid, and gas. And we have, our solid molecules that are vibrating,
Don't
liquid
forget
molecules.
porcine condensate.
Yeah. Yes.
Or plasma.
The water. Well, yeah. Yes, definitely. But we also have plasma and you have to add plasma in there. But if you're just going based off of, the basic second grade water cycle, you have molecules within a solid that vibrate, molecules within a liquid that move slowly, and molecules within a gas that move fast. So when you think about all forms of matter within our universe, you have solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. And of course, if you go deeper into physics and chemistry, you are going to have more than that. There's a lot more to it than this. This is a very rudimentary, elementary school definition. But the rudimentary, elementary school definition, we always have to remember that a lot of these Hermetic laws are not just talking about magic and mysticism. These are physicists. These are physicists that don't have the tools that our physicists have today. These are alchemists and chemists that don't have the tools that we have today. But they were still working on understanding the basics of science. And so when we talk about the law of vibration, it is also literal. It is real molecules. And so every single thing in the entire universe is vibrating. The molecules that make up your hand, the molecules that make up this table, the molecules that make up the books and they are literally vibrating. Literally. The molecules within them are moving. The molecules within the steam that comes off your coffee, those molecules are moving extremely fast. The molecules that exist within the water that you drink, those are moving. All molecules within the entire world, all atomic structures are moving. And so when we talk about the law of vibration, remember that we're also talking about science. It's rudimentary science, it's ancient science, it's but it is science. And we are talking about real molecules that really do vibrate. This is not just metaphysics. This is not just mysticism, which I believe that mysticism and metaphysics are real too. But we are also talking about things that you can literally look at, that you can look at with a microscope and that you can see. Everything vibrates. Everything.
I never quite understood. The words are hard. I'm sorry. I never quite understood how drastic of a mystical take people took on the vibrations. It always kind of threw me off guard because I'm like, well, yes, everything has its own wavelength, everything has its own vibrations and its own frequencies, but that's also on a logical stance. And also, why would a higher vibration be better than a lower vibration if everyone has different frequencies? That's kind of like saying people who vibrate on a lower vibration are worse people, which I don't agree with. It's everyone has their own frequency, everyone has their own vibrations, and you have to have and try to find people that vibrate with you on the same level, just like same thing with the stones and things like that mesh with you. You need to find that on a mystical sense, but I don't see how higher vibrations would be better than lower vibrations. I don't quite understand that. And it always felt wrong to me.
Yes, and I completely 100% and totally agree with you. I do not like this whole idea that we all need to try to vibrate as quickly as possible. I think it sounds really silly, and I've always not hated, hate is a strong word. I don't really hate anything. But I've always seriously, immensely disliked the idea that you have to continuously try to make your vibration vibrate faster in order to be a better, more magical, more enlightened human being. I always thought that that was really silly, especially when you think about it in a scientific way, that you're saying that like somehow water is less spiritual and enlightened than gas. And I always thought that was really funny. And that we're saying that, you know, the table is less ethical than the steam. And I always thought that that was really funny. Just like not true. And
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad we all agree.
It's a very,
You see,
very
this vibration of people thing, that's not a principle of vibration.
No, it's not. No.
It's the second rule of hermetics. It's correspondence.
Yep.
Please educate yourself, people. And to me, I'm just going to jump in right on top of you here. Excuse that expression, especially with what we've been talking about earlier on.
Yes, yes.
To me, vibration can be summed up by one thing. The principle of vibration can be put down to one thing. And again, it ties into alchemy. Fire.
Yes.
You can see the heat. You can feel the heat. You can see the shimmer of heat. You can see the gas that it produces. And you can hear the crackling of the moisture. That is a principle of vibration. Let go.
I know this was said earlier, but it you said like all atoms are like buzzing and vibrating, and like not this year, I almost said earlier this year, it's 2025. Recently, we'll use recent science has shown that like plants do feel things. You put heat next to it and the atoms vibrate faster because it's like afraid of burning and pain. Like take that, vegetarians. No.
I know. No, yes, definitely. There have been so many studies that they are doing right now about how plants react to pain, and how
not just pain. They've got one in the Netherlands at the moment that's doing the correlation between plants and music.
Oh, I love that one too. I've seen that one too, which is awesome. Yes.
Also, I just figured I would put out a forewarning. I have to go soon. So if I just dip out randomly, that is the reason.
Okay, that is totally fine. And I know that we've gone a little bit over already our time. So that is totally fine. But yes, so I think that everybody I'm really, really happy too that in this class specifically, this is one of the reasons I like having smaller classes, that nobody got mad that I said that the whole vibration thing that everybody says, where you need to be vibrating higher so that you can become more enlightened. I'm really happy that as a class we can decide that's silly, and that, you know, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing to believe in. It just means that it's a little silly, and it's also a little judgmental.
Let's be honest, that comes from the bastardized. Let's be honest, that comes from the bastardization, and I use that word correctly, of Kundalini. I'm just going to call it what it is.
Totally.
Understand how recent of a thought process it is. That thought process has come over and only been popularized over the past year or so. like it's a very recent popularization. Like, I'm not saying that it didn't exist before, like people didn't think that before, but it wasn't nearly as popular.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. A
That-
lot of people like very recently. I think also just like witchcraft being brought to social media definitely had a lot of these ideas kind of spring out
I
from
think a lot of it. I think a lot of it comes down to the three initiates.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And don't get me wrong, the Kabbalion, whatever you want to call it, is a good book. But let's be honest. I I'm gonna refer back to the 60s and the New Thought movement. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and definitely the new age wave of neo-paganism for sure has brought some very interesting kind of judgmental silly ideas about paganism, especially also due to people attempting to relate it to Christianity and to Abrahamic
Right,
religions.
exactly. It all goes back to, I mean, if you look into the history of the Kabbalion, I mean, it was first came out in what, early 1900s, I think. Was it the early 1900s when it was first published?
I think so. It's hard with that one because you also have the different versions of just the cabal, and then that's a whole thing. And so yeah, but I think
Right.
the neo-pagany one, I think yeah, was like 1918, 1920s, somewhere around there.
Right. And if you ever do research onto this, you'll come across a really interesting character, a guy by the name of William Walker Atkinson.
Yes.
The dude was a prolific writer, especially when it came to the New Thought movement. And I know there's always controversy over the book on who the three initiates were, whether it was just him or whether it was Paul Foster Case or Mabel Collins that got involved in it as well, those being the three initiates. I've always said take that book with a very large pinch of salt. But if you're looking to get a perspective of hermetics at a stretch, it's a book you could recommend.
I agree. Yes. And like I said,
But
during this
again,
class,
that's just my opinion, and you know.
oh no, I agree. Yeah, totally. But yeah, as I said during this class too, we are also going to discuss and talk about okay, so I prefaced the Hermetic laws by saying this is something that I like about the Thoth deck. And now we are also going to talk about why Hermeticism is a little bit ethically gray. And we're going to discuss and talk about that too. But to kind of sum this up, so anyway, let's move on to the law of polarity. If people have to go, it's totally okay. But I don't want to start the next class in the middle of the Hermetic laws. So we're just going to attempt to finish off this video and record us discussing the Hermetic laws and go through the rest of them. Depending on if it hits like 10 o'clock, we'll probably stop. But anyway, so the law of polarity. So the law of polarity, everything is dual. All truths are half truths. Everything contains its opposite. Extremes meet, and every pair of opposites can be reconciled. So The law of polarity is another one of those laws that I think is funny that we all assume that it must solely and only be talking about mysticism. Because when we talk about the law of polarity, a lot of people like to bring it into spellcraft and divination work and into manifestation, which is beautiful. Like I said, totally wonderful. I bring it into that too. But to also discuss the literal points of the law of polarity, the real, not not the mysticism isn't real, the scientific, the different part of the law of polarity, the more scientific version of the law of polarity, is kind of what I was discussing and talking about with the law of mentalism. That all things on earth are perception, that nothing is real, nothing. And the more that you learn about mysticism and alchemy and about astral projection and about traveling and time and space and quantum physics, you start to realize what people mean when they say that nothing is real. Because scientifically, all things are just perception, all of them. What we see with our eyeballs is not the same thing as what a cat sees with their eyeballs. And who is to say that what a cat sees is wrong and that what we see is right? Who's to say that what for those of you who don't know, mantis shrimp have better rods and cones than we do. They can see in infrared, they can see they see better than us. They can see more than we can. Who's to say that what we see is fake and what they see is real? Because they can see better. They can see infrared. They can see in the dark. They can see at a way, their eyes are just way better than ours. So is what they see real and what we see is just fake? All things are just perception. All things are just you seeing the world and then your brain deciding what that means and perceiving it. And if nothing is real, all things are just perception, then there are no truths. Everything contains its opposite. Every opposite can be reconciled. There is no true opposites. There are no true truths. My truths are going to be different than your truths. And every single thing in this world, everything, is just perception. The colors I see are not the colors that you see. The ways that I perceive the universe, the way that I think, the way that I perceive facts, the way that I perceive everything is completely and totally different than the way that you perceive everything. And not only that, it's completely different from the way that each and every organism on this planet perceives everything. So nothing is true. Nothing is false. Nothing is real and nothing is fake. Everything on earth is perception. And everything also contains its opposite. So, for example, everything is both alive and dead at the same time. Because the only thing that changes whether or not you are alive or dead is time. If you go back in time, you were not born. If you go forward in time, you are dead. The only thing deciding whether or not you are alive or dead is time. You are both alive and dead at the same time, depending on time and space. And as we know, time and space are just perceptions of the human mind. So those are not real, meaning you're alive and death are not real. If everything is just human perception, if everything is false and just perception of the human mind, including time and space and reality, then you are both alive and dead at the same time. If you have read a book versus not reading a book, the only difference between that is time and quantum space and decisions, which once again, all of that is just perception and the human mind. meaning that you have both read the book and haven't read the book all at the same time. All opposites are half truths. Everything contains its opposite. If all things are just perception, if all things are just the human mind, then there are no opposites. All opposites contain themselves. What are your thoughts?
Toyotathon is still on. Now's the perfect time to recharge with a new Toyota. Taking a ride for hybrid hiking. Sounds fun. Ooh. We're going on a road trip in Tacoma. Wow, right. We're taking our practice known as the Sequoia.
Okay, bye, Salem. Hi, Storm. It'll be up on YouTube within the next couple weeks. Wow. Did anybody hear my cool explanation of that of that hermetic law? Because it was a pretty cool explanation. I was pretty proud of myself.
I did. I'm just on mute.
Well, good. I'm glad that at least you heard. I thought that was pretty profound. I was like, yes, I nailed that one, but nobody was here to hear it. How sad. Okay. So cool. Let's see. Who's still here? River and Robin.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. So,
sorry, I've just got back. Sorry, just got back. I did hear what you said.
Oh, you did?
I did hear what you said. Okay, so I always attribute this to four things: life, death, time, and space, which you pretty much covered.
I did. That's exactly what I talked about. Yeah. Right
Yeah.
on.
So, and it is just purely perception.
Exactly.
You can't, people. It's this. The issue I have is pretty much the same one as you do. As everybody goes for that mystical thing rather than thinking about it from the physics or the chemistry or the biology of it, which is where I believe the roots of Hermeticism are. And you covered it perfectly.
Aw, thank you. I felt pretty proud of that one. I was like, I actually said the words worded, which was good.
You adulted, which was good.
I did. It was very good. I was very proud of myself. So yes. Cool. Does anybody have anything to add to the law of polarity? Or does anybody disagree with me? Because that's what I was expecting. I was expecting somebody to be like, what do you mean, Alex, that nothing is real? You've done too many mushrooms.
Okay. Agent de provocateur, explain yourself. I need a better explanation. You know what I mean. Come on, break it down.
Well, no, I mean, that was, I don't have a better way to break it down. I just more wanted to see if anybody disagreed.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people on YouTube that disagree.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, I'm sure there'll be so many people on YouTube who disagree with me, but that's okay. You know, honestly, in order to disagree with me, they'll have to watch 3 hours of this video, and so we'll see if anybody actually disagrees with me, if they actually get this far deep into the video.
We all have that TikTok brain rot.
Exactly. So they're probably going to watch 5 minutes of it and go, "Oh, cool. She talked about Crowley for a second," and then move on. And that's where they're going to get. They're not going to get to this. This is 3 hours in. Nobody's going to see this.
Yeah, you don't have that fucking train game in the background that people are always jumping over.
Right. I actually thought about doing that to some of our videos and just like putting a little animation in the background to get people to watch. And then I was like, I don't know. Because nobody actually watches more than like 15 minutes, except for students who are actually trying to get the certification, because I force them to.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Nobody does. But anyway, so cool. As long as nobody disagrees with me, or like, I mean, if you do disagree with me, I would love to hear why you disagree, because that's fine if you disagree with me. And you're right, I probably have taken too many mushrooms.
I disagree with you just because it's Saturday.
Yeah.
It's Saturday. There it is.
It is. So the next,
Oh, it is.
It is. The next we have the law of rhythm. Rhythm is rhythm is the measured motion between two extremes. All opposites flow together and into each other. Everything is continually becoming its opposite. Heraclitus. Thank you. Heraclitus said, because everything is in perpetual change, everything is in a continual state of becoming, a cyclic interplay of opposites. So for this one, my interpretation, which, like I said, totally fine if you have a different interpretation, my interpretation of this one is very similar. I feel like these all kind of flow into each other, and that's on purpose, obviously. But this one relates to the law of polarity, being that everything is becoming its opposites, and opposites flow together. One of the most easy representations of this is life and death, but that one's very easy and a little too simplistic, because obviously the second you are born, you are becoming dead. And I know that's a really sad way to look at it, but it's just true. As soon as something exists, as soon as something is born, as soon as something is created, as soon as something is made, it is on its way to breaking down. It's on its way to dying. And that includes all things. That includes every river that is created is on its way to drying up, or to overflowing, and to flooding, and to becoming a lake or an ocean, or to meeting up with the ocean. All plants that are planted are on their way to dying. All humans that are born are on their way to dying. Everything is continuously becoming its opposite. Everything is constantly in perpetual change. The only constant in this universe is change. That is it. There is nothing in this universe that does not change. Nothing. And so rhythm is the measured motion between two extremes. Rhythm is, you can talk about it as the rhythm of life, the rhythm of the universe, but all things in this universe are in perpetual change, and there is nothing you can do about that. What are your thoughts?
Has given the Voynich manuscript
fame, and allure. This is me again, isn't it? Okay, so
Yes.
forget what you've ever learned about rhythm. I can sum it up in one word. The whole principle of rhythm. It is a circle. There is no end. There is no beginning. There just is.
I love that. That's a beautiful way of putting it.
That was how it was first explained to me. Do not think of it as rhythm. Do not think of it as movement. Think of it as a constant. It is a circle. It has no beginning. It has no end. If you stand at one point at the circle, you're both at the beginning and at the end. But it still exists. Words from a wise old man that were taught to me many years ago.
I love that. And I think that that exact same statement could be made about the law of polarity as well. And so I think that's really cool.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, when you look at the Hermetic laws, they tend to, even though they're separate laws, they flow into each other, but they also overlap.
They do, definitely.
And I think a large problem is a lot of people, when they look at Hermetics, they go on the microcosm and the macrocosm. Okay, that's psychology. Sorry, that's young.
Yes, it is.
I mean, do we want to really go down that route? I mean, I'll quite happily talk for 8 hours on that. But basically, as far as rhythm is concerned, it is one thing. It is a circle. There is no beginning. There is no end. You're at one fixed point. And where it begins, it also ends.
Yes.
But it's still constant in the fact that it's there.
Yes, definitely.
And if you want to take it to the alchemical side of things, what symbol is often represented with no beginning and no end? Alex?
The infinity symbol?
No.
A circle?
Think. Okay. Yes, circle, but what's in the circle?
A pentagram?
Oxygen?
God. What eats its own tail?
Snake.
Oh, oh my gosh, the thing, what you use to make a oh my god, the thing that I always say is the hardest thing for me. Oh my gosh, the transmutation circle, the little thing that you use to make that. What's that called?
Correct.
The thing.
The oberus.
Yes, thank you. That. The thing that you use to make a transmutation circle.
You know?
Yeah, that thingy. Yes, definitely. No, yeah, totally.
You know, again, it's the tangent between Hermetics and alchemy and how that's often overlooked, and it takes a more spiritual thing, which, yeah, I can see that, but I don't necessarily subscribe to that.
No, same. Exactly. That's why, yeah.
That's just the way I was taught. You know, that's just the way I was mentored with Hermetics and with alchemy. You know, it just is. It's a circle. It's an oberus. It's no end, no beginning. It's infinite.
It is. No, that's a wonderful way of describing it. And I really love that you do the same thing that I do. that these things are all very scientific and literal. They're based on things like chemistry, alchemy, physics, quantum physics, and astrophysics, that these things do not have to be solely and only metaphysics. And I
Right.
love that you see it that way as well.
I mean, maybe it's my alchemical brain set and my, the way I just practice, but it's not. It's a physical thing. It's not necessarily a spiritual thing, although it can be. But then, if you look at alchemy, do you follow the three kingdoms or do you go the spiritual route?
Right? Exactly.
Both are plausible. Both are, do you follow Newton or do you follow D, or do you go Saint Germain? Well,
Yes.
if we want to talk about the principle of rhythm, Saint Germain, he's your man.
So true. Definitely. I agree. So the law of gender. so the law of gender, this one is actually really fun because I think that this one, it's just as fun for me to look at this specific one spiritually. This one I can see being just as much fun to look at in a spiritual way as you do in a very literal way. Because yes, in a very literal sense, everything has both masculine and feminine components, force and energy, yin and yang. And masculine and feminine are just one, that every single human being, that every single animal, that every single entity, that every single plant, that every single everything has masculine and feminine energy within it. And you can perceive and decide on your own, based on research, based on personal experience, based on mysticism, based on whatever you would like, what masculine and feminine mean to you. And you can take that both literally and spiritually. When we discuss processing and psychologically processing our gender and what gender means to us, I think that that's something that everybody should do, that everybody should process literally and not spiritually necessarily, what gender means to you. What does the word feminine mean to you? And if you take out all of the very human stereotypes that we have put on to gender, if you take all of that away, you take away the fact that like feminine means girl, that feminine means whatever the fuck stereotypes that we have put on the word feminine. There's millions of them, and I don't need to perpetuate them and repeat them. And same thing goes for masculine. Feminine does not mean girl, and masculine does not mean boy. That is such a silly way to perceive it. That is such an elementary way to perceive it, and that's just silly. Okay, that is not what those words mean. But processing and deciding and kind of having introspection and thinking about what the word feminine does mean to you and what the word masculine does mean to you. And if you take out boy and girl, you take out woman and man, you take out stereotypes placed upon these words, what do those words truly mean to you? And that when you really do define those words, you start to realize that everything has masculine and feminine components. And then when you take that to a more spiritual level, you can also start to think about the other synonyms or the other ways to perceive that. So you have masculine and feminine, and you also have force and energy. You also have yin and yang. And you also have a lot of these different words that we use to describe two different forces of energy. And what does that mean to you? What does yin mean to you? And what does yang mean to you? What does force mean? What does energy mean? We use these words a lot and we throw them around, but what do they mean to you? And when you start to define them, and you truly start to define them without the stereotypes put onto them by the rest of humankind, you start to realize that all aspects of life have both. And then that is the definition of yin and yang and force and energy, that all things in the world have both, and that neither one is good or bad, that all things in the world have both, and that neither one is better or worse, and that also neither one necessarily defines you or doesn't, that all things have both. And when you take away the word man from the word masculine, and you take away the word woman from the word feminism, or from the word feminine, I know, from the word feminine, then you end up having to process and think a lot more. And you have to read a lot more, and you have to educate yourself a lot more, rather than just taking at face value the definition of woman and man. And instead, you have to truly define feminine and masculine. And I think that this is not only a very cool hermetic law that can be viewed both spiritually and literally and logically and mathematically and scientifically, but also one that I feel is relevant in today's world, that a lot more people need to sit down and define what the words feminine and masculine mean to them, and to process their own gender, and to process what the word gender means, and then to realize and understand that all aspects of life in the world have both feminine and masculine energy. And then what does that mean?
Just waiting for the next curious mind.
What
This
are
where
you?
I come in?
Yeah, sure. Yes, please.
Okay.
Till next time.
I don't think of it as two forces. I think of it as three. I think of it as the triprimer: salt, mercury, and sulfur.
Yes, we talked about this in my alchemy class. Hell yeah. Continue.
Solidity, liquidity, and combustibility.
Yes.
You know, then do you want to take that to the metaphysical side of things? Earth being salt, water being mercury, and fire being sulfur. Air being your spiritual element, I guess. I've always thought of it as, okay, think of a fire triangle, okay? You need three things for it to work. You need heat, you need energy or a source, and you need air. If you take away any one of those, the fire triangle collapses. So don't think of masculine and feminine as male and female. Think about it in its entirety. And to label something as that is a male thing, well, you've just taken two sides of your triangle out. You know, gender can be mercury, it can be liquidity. It can also be salt, solidity. That's, you know, probably an older version of it, you know, but combustibility comes in from both male and female, masculine and feminine. Try telling a redheaded female, to calm down. Take a chill pill. See how that works for you. But that's the way I look at this one. I don't look at it as masculine or feminine. I you know, I know it is supposed to be one or the other, but I don't see it as that. I've always looked at it from an alchemist point of view, you know. So soul and spirit. Just the way I view it.
No, I love that. That is so cool and such a unique way of describing that. That is so awesome. I love that. And I've never heard that way of describing it, and I love it. That's beautiful. That is so cool.
That's
Awesome.
all I got on that one.
No, that is so cool. Thank you. Does anybody else have a kind of an outlook on the law of gender? And even just, I don't know, because how old Hermeticism is, I think that it's a very, very cool law that people a very, very long time ago were processing the meaning of the spiritual meaning and the logical meaning, the scientific meaning of feminine and masculine, and then how it relates to everything. And I think that Paul gave a really great way that it relates to alchemy, but also just remember that these hermetic laws, you know, they're supposed to relate to everything. And I think that that was such a great way to relate it to alchemy. And
Right, and I mean that's typically Paracelsian alchemy, or you know, the philosophy of Pericles that comes from. But again, that's a whole different subject.
yeah, but no, that's awesome. And yes, does anybody else have any thoughts on the law of gender? Okay, and then we have our last one, the law of cause and effect. Nothing happens by chance. For every effect, there is a cause. Every cause is, in itself, an effect of something else. My perception and the way that I understand that is I don't like, so the very stereotypical way to perceive this one, of course, is cause and effect, and what we know about physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and to think of it very literally as nothing happens by chance, everything happens for a reason, and that every action that you make is therefore going to have a reaction. And that's the surface level, you know, way to view this. And I like that, you know, that's fine. That's, you know, all of those things are very true. But also thinking about it, once again, this one, I think the literal translation is very clear, at least in my opinion. I think that we all understand that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. We all understand cause and effect. We all understand that when you make an action, something will then happen. That when you do something, something is going to then happen, which is the cause and effect situation of life. And when anything does something, something is therefore going to happen. Whether that means, you know, if a tree is cut down in the forest, something happens. Whether that means the ground vibrates, a bird dies, whatever. There is things that happen due to an action. When you do something, something will happen. When you choose to wake up and get up in the morning and get out of bed, things are going to happen. Every action has a reaction. Things will happen if you do a thing. I think that that's very clear and understood, and something that most people understand. It's very literal. Now, I like to take this one a little bit more spiritual and kind of bring it a little bit more into metaphysics. And that is that this law translates to not only the astral realm, that this law translates to spellcraft, this law translates to alchemy, it translates to herbalism, and to all different aspects of metaphysics and spiritualism. And so therefore, if you do something, if you cause an effect, if you cause something to happen on the astral plane, there is effects. If you decide to do something spiritually, if you decide to create something using alchemy, if you decide to do anything with your spellcraft, with your magic, if you decide to do anything in a spiritual way, that there are also spiritual effects. And I think that that's a little bit more fun to talk about. So every cause in itself is an effect. So if, for example, if we take this very spiritual in an astral projection kind of way, and if you are working with astral projection and working on time travel, or working on, let's just take, yeah, if you're working on time travel in astral projection, that every cause, everything that you do in the astral plane, in a different dimension, in a different time period, in and of itself is an effect. Time doesn't change. You didn't actually change a timeline. You didn't change anything in the past. All you did was, what you did in and of itself was an effect. So all you did was, in the future, you were already going to change the past. And so that already happened. And so I think that the law of cause and effect brings in really cool discussions about time travel within astral projection. It brings in very cool discussions and interesting and metaphysical discussions about dimensional travel and speaking to different entities and speaking to gods and goddesses, because you are creating an effect. And by creating that effect, that in and of itself was an effect of the actions that you had. I know this is really difficult to understand. I'm not explaining it well, but this is a really fun one to discuss metaphysically and spiritually and alchemically and astral projection. It's really cool to talk about astral projection, how it has cause and effect, how your actions affect and change the astral realm, how your actions change the universe, how your actions and your magic can have an effect on, like a butterfly effect on the rest of the world. And this one's really fun to talk about in a more spiritual way, because I think we all understand the very literal idea of cause and effect. And it's more fun to talk about it spiritually.
Is this where I come in again?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so change the wording of this. Okay, take it from the principle of cause and effect to nothing happens by chance. So when you talk about, for instance, and again, this is kind of spiritual, but if you think about combining two things here, so let's say you're doing shadow work and you come to a trauma point and you're able to recognize that trauma point, but then you take it to the next level and you do that trauma point by going into, say, the lower realm on astral projection and traveling your own timeline back to that point, recognizing, acknowledging, and accepting that point, then return from the astral to the physical. That then helps you progress with your shadow work. So it's not cause and effect. It's nothing happens by chance. If you're stood by the side of a lake and you take a rock and you throw it up in the air, you know what's going to happen because as above, so below, gravity, it hits the water and it floats down to the bottom and it sinks and it just sits there. That one rock that you throw through not only has a visible effect, i.e. you can see the ripples, but it also has an invisible effect in that one placement of the rock on the riverbed causes the water to flow in a different way. Where it landed, was it chance? No, it landed where the water carried it to. So it didn't happen by chance. It happened because of an action. And that's how I see the principle of cause and effect. I don't look at it as cause and effect. What I look at it as is nothing happens by chance. I just like to reword that one. And that's how I've always dealt with it. And I use the example of shadow work because you're in the present, you're looking to the past. Butterfly effect, therefore it has a ripple-on effect further down the timeline in the fact that because you've gone back, you're able to go forward. And that's how I view this one.
Yes, and I completely agree. I think that nothing happens by chance, which is why I put that as the first sentence is an amazing way of describing that one, and that's how I describe it too. And I think that you did a really good job of explaining that, and it was hard for me to explain and to make the words say what was happening in my head. So thank you. That was beautiful, and I completely agree with everything you said, and I very much view it that way too.
I mean, again, it's just, I mean, you could ask 10 people to explain these laws and you're going to get 10 different answers, even if, you know, people are well versed in hermetics versus people that aren't well versed in hermetics. I mean, what does cause and effect mean to Robin? What does it mean to River? What does it mean to Storm? Cause and effect are, you know, it's going to have a different meaning to each person. There are going to be overlaps between where people see things, like with me and you, for instance, the way you described it versus the way I described it. There's a lot of overlap. So when it comes to hermetics, I think a lot of it is based on knowledge and knowledge based of where that person is. But I also think it has the ability to evolve and grow.
I agree, definitely. And I think that I also
Yeah.
think too that I've taught a class on hermetics about 4 different times, but they were all spanned out by a year. Like I taught this class on the hermetic laws about 2 years ago, and I promise you that what I said today in this class is different than what I said 2 years ago in my previous class. And so I agree. Your definition of these laws kind of grows and evolves with you.
And that's not a bad thing. That's something to be, you know, celebrated and looked at in a positive light, not a negative light.
Yeah, no,
Because
yeah.
you know, we all interpret things differently with age and, you know, experience and knowledge and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So don't let them be set in stone, you know, like this as above, so below, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's a great quote and it's a great starting point, but let's evolve, people.
Agreed. Yes, totally. So yes, please feel free to check out this slideshow on the website. All of these little worksheets that are on here, I got from Rena when I was little. And so it's a pretty cool slideshow, but it also discusses too a lot of the things that we're going to talk about with Crowley and with the Thoth deck. And so, and it gives you some things to study at home too. So, yes.
We can still see your screen, by the way.
I know. These are all the different slideshows. I know, look at that one too. The last time that I looked at the 7 Hermetic laws before this was in 2020. So I was actually wrong. I did not teach that class 2 years ago. I taught that class 5 years ago. Wow. That's crazy. Anyway. So, that's so during the next class, we will discuss why we went over the Hermetic laws, what on earth that has to do with Crowley and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Thoth deck, and what that has to do with the major arcana in the Thoth deck. And I do think that there is some validity in the major arcana that Crowley created and in its connection to the Hermetic laws and in its connection to kind of to Wicca and to fairy Wicca and Alexandrian Wicca and Gardnerian Wicca and how that all kind of ties into the Thoth deck. And we will discuss and talk about that in the next class. And for homework, if you would like to do homework in my classes is never mandatory, but it's kind of just to help you continue to learn about this if this is something you're extremely interested in. I suggest that once again, we didn't get to the Iron Pentacle today, so that will also be next class. Hopefully we will get to the Iron Pentacle next class. So part of your homework is to look into that document that Paul sent out to everyone, and also just to do your own research on the Iron Pentacle, because that'll be our next topic after the Hermetic laws. And to look into the Hermetic laws, kind of decide what the Hermetic laws mean to you, as well as the Iron Pentacle. And then to look at the graphs and charts that I'm going to put on the website of the differences between the Thoth deck and the traditional tarot deck. And that is your homework. And I will see you all next week for our next class.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
If you need to, go ahead and put that document up on the website, Alex.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. Awesome. I will. Thank you so much. Yay.
I mean, as I say, it comes at it from a heavy alchemy side of things, but the interpretation is still there.
Yes. No, it's beautiful. I read the whole thing already. It's amazing. It is so good. Thank you so much for letting me put that on the website, because it is amazing and such a great resource for people.
I may have something as well